They were known as the Crossley Hill Boys, drug dealers who flooded Mobile with deadly narcotics.
We're talking methamphetamine, ice, pills, heroin, fentanyl. Federal prosecutors in Mobile agreeing to talk about the case for the first time with a Fox 10 News exclusive about how they busted this organization. Here's our Brendan Kirby.
Federal prosecutors in Mobile have convicted more than 36 people. In their wake, a trail of despair and death. Kelsey Johnston was a 27-year-old mother of 2 young children, a Theodore High School graduate who'd been a cheerleader in both middle and high schools. On October 11, 2018, she ended up on the floor of the Roadway Inn in Tillman's Corner, the victim of a fentanyl overdose. Her mother, Lee Wade, recalls learning that news after she pulled up to the motel during a frantic search prompted by a strange Facebook Messenger call to her daughter's account.
I lost it. I hit the dirt. I never in a million years did I imagine that that was what I was going to roll up on. Never. So the policemen had just got there, so they hadn't even been upstairs to do their investigation yet.
Johnston succumbed to fentanyl, an incredibly potent drug that has wrought havoc across the country and was then just beginning to hit the streets in Mobile. When investigators probed the circumstances of Johnston's death, they uncovered a loose network of dealers. Assistant U.S. Attorney Louis Perrell says that it wasn't the volume of drugs or the amount of money changing hands that drew the attention of federal prosecutors.
More of an impact case because it had a definite adverse impact on the community here when you look at the overdose deaths.
An indictment naming 42 defendants alleged the conspirators were responsible for at least 4 overdose deaths and numerous hospitalizations. Much of the enterprise was focused on this house on Crossley Hill Drive in Grand Bay. That's where the group gets its nickname, Crossley Hill Boys. One of the defendants even had the initials CHB tattooed on his hand. One of the key players, Martin Melton, admitted to dealing drugs from this house owned by his mother and her husband. Annetta Owens and Ed Ray Patterson have pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges. Court records show that they gambled large sums of the drug proceeds at Biloxi casinos. A January 2018 raid turned up drugs, scales, weapons, and ammo. Court records show that Melton and the other dealers sold methamphetamine ice and then branched out into heroin and fentanyl. The sources were spread across the Gulf Coast. Moss Point, Pascagoula, Theodore. One of the dealers, a record producer named Chad Delavaluse, a.k.a. Chad the Pilot, admitted to buying fentanyl from a supplier in California who sent the drugs through the mail to his home in Lake Forest and other addresses. Much of the dealing took place at the house on Crossley Hill Drive, the so-called Blue House on Dawes Road, and low-end motels off of Interstate 10 in Tillman's Corner. At least 2 of those overdose deaths occurred at the Roadway Inn, later called the Regency Inn. It's gone now, torn down after a storm damaged the building. Mobile police say they responded to various incidents there 134 times in 2018 alone. It was so well known as a place for drugs and prostitution that the feds initially indicted 3 of the motel owners, but eventually dropped those charges.
2 things were going on, and they were doing everything they could to stop it, but they couldn't.
Attorney Jeff Dean says his client did his best as an owner who didn't work on site.
So anyway, they had incompetent, corrupt security guards. They had corrupt people working at the night desk, even the maids.
Fentanyl, a synthetic drug called gray death by dealers, often gets added to other drugs. It's up to 100 times stronger than morphine and has fueled a dramatic jump in overdose deaths. The latest provisional government data show that more than 1,200 people overdosed in the 12-month period ending in November in Alabama. That was up 28% year over year. Assistant U.S. Attorney George May says that it's the first time in his career that the cutting agent is more powerful than the drug itself. He pointed to testimony from an expert witness last month who told jurors about enough fentanyl to cover the date of a penny.
He testified that was a deadly amount of fentanyl, deadly dose, and I think it was 2 milligrams, which is a very small quantity.
Kelsey Johnston's dose proved more than enough to be fatal. Her cousin and best friend, Allison Johnston, says Kelsey had struggled with postpartum depression after the birth of her second child and began using meth. She recalls pressing her to explain why.
Her response was something that didn't really fully make sense to me until after this case. She said, it's not that I love the drug so much, it's just the pain that I feel is unbearable.
Defendants from this case continue to get sentenced here at federal court, and prosecutors say they've developed several spin-off cases from the original indictment. Reporting in Mobile, Brendan Kirby, Fox 10 News.